Hi guys, I'm Dejanae, and I finally decided to carve out a little space for myself here on Booktube. My channel is going to be mostly focused on media, mainly books, sometimes TV and film, and all things culture. So thank you guys for being here. Today I am going to be talking about The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. It is my most recently completed book, and I thought it was such a rich reading experience, and I'm really excited to chat about it with y'all. I will say, because this is a longer video, there's probably going to be some spoilers in it. There is a huge plot twist at the end of this book, so I honestly don't recommend watching this video unless you have actually read and completed this book, or you don't think you're going to read it at all. You just want to hear somebody yap about it. But if you do plan on reading this, please just save this video and watch it for after you've completed the book. The Nickel Boys starts on the campus of Nickel Academy, which was known to be a reform school for boys. It's kind of like a juvenile detention center, if you will, but it is a school where lots of atrocities were happening. Young boys were being beaten, taken away from their families, unalived, buried without their families knowing. And we start the book on an excavation site because there are archaeology students who are doing some work for graduate school there, and they start to discover things. And one of the things that they discovered is an unmarked burial ground. And that kind of plunges us into our story. That's in the prologue. When the story starts, we meet a young boy named Elwood who is being raised by his grandmother. His parents left him with his grandmother, and she's doing the best that she can to raise Elwood and put him in the right direction. He's 16 and he's able to start classes at college to get credits, and on his way to school one day, he unknowingly steps into a stolen vehicle as he's hitchhiking for a ride to school. From there, he's arrested and he's sent to Nickel Academy. During his time there, he obviously witnesses a lot of horrors. He is subject to violence, but he also makes an unexpected friend in a boy named Turner, and the story kind of takes off from there. One of the things that I think Colson Whitehead did so well in this book was the characterization of each character, and I would really love to kind of get into those. We meet Elwood as a young boy where he goes to work with her grandmother. She works in a hotel called the Richmond, and the Richmond is a segregated hotel, so all of the guests that stay there are white, and most of the workers that work cleaning in the restaurant, in the kitchen, they are black. So Elwood is already growing up in a society that is segregated, but he has dreams of a different kind of life. He actually was offered a job at the Richmond, but he decided that he didn't want to be the third or fourth generation of his family that worked in that hotel. He wanted to one day be a guest in that hotel. In addition to this, Elwood is really, really interested in the life and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. He is a young boy during the time that Martin Luther King is traveling to different places in the country and giving these really inspirational speeches, and also talking about the oppressive forces that are at hand against Black people in the United States. And I think it's really important to note that his discipleship to Dr. Martin Luther King's work and his words really informs how Elwood lives his life. There's a quote before Elwood is actually sent to Nickel when he's thinking about the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the quote says, "There are big forces that want to keep the Negro down like Jim Crow, and there are small forces that want to keep you down like other people. And in the face of all those things, the big ones and the smaller ones, you have to stand up straight and maintain your sense of who you are." And this is in the very beginning of the book on page 25. And when I read that, I said, I feel like this is really going to inform his time at Nickel, and it's going to be what makes Elwood make the decisions that he makes. Elwood is also a very bookish young boy. He's very green and naive. So going to Nickel was not only just a culture shock because of how horrible the place it is, but he was kind of sheltered by his grandmother, in my opinion, because she was trying to make up for the fact that his parents left him at such a young age. So she was just trying to do the best that she could to raise him and show him as much love as possible. But keeping in mind that Elwood has spent most of his time in school and under his grandmother's tutelage and listening to vinyl recordings of Dr. Martin Luther King, when he gets to Nickel Academy and makes a friend in a boy like Turner, who grew up without his parents, or his father was abusive to his mother, and then he kind of let the streets raise him, or he didn't have a choice but to be raised by the streets. He's kind of such a stark difference to Elwood, and so their friendship is really unexpected. And there's a quote that I'm going to read soon that really describes Elwood's characterization, but through Turner's eyes, because in a way Turner was jealous of Elwood. Even though they both ended up in the same place, they both ended up at Nickel Academy, their lives were so vastly different from one another. What Turner says about Elwood is that he's sturdy. Sturdy was the word he returned to. Even though the Tallahassee boy looked soft, conducted himself like a goody goody, and had an irritating tendency to preach, wore eyeglasses you wanted to grind underfoot like a butterfly. He talked like a white college boy, read books when he didn't have to, and minded them for uranium to power his own personal A-bomb. Still sturdy. So like Turner's thinking of all these reasons why he shouldn't like Elwood, but he's like, that's a sturdy man. Like, and they become friends. And very shortly after, Turner essentially makes the decision that he's going to be friends with Elwood. He's like, I have to teach him some things that are not in books, because in my opinion, I feel like Turner really wanted to look out for his friend. He really was trying to do the best that he could. So it says this is why Turner brought Elwood to the trees, to show him something that wasn't in books. And in the trees, in the Nickel Boys, that's basically where they bought boys to whip them or to hang them and to unalive them. Another thing that I was thinking about in this very moment, when Turner was kind of showing Elwood some of the things that happened at Nickel that Elwood hadn't seen with his own eyes, or that he very narrowly escaped because he was trying to lead other boys in the right direction. He tried to break up a fight and they did beat Elwood, but Turner's trying to show him like much, much more worse things can happen here. One of the things that I was reading that was like, even though I know a lot of the history of violence and brutality that has happened in these United States to Black people and are still happening to Black and Brown people, I'm still never not shocked. And it's almost like, with all the things that I do know, it's like I can still read about new brutal and disgusting ways that violence is enacted upon people, and it's just disgusting. Another character that I think a lot about is Harper. Harper is a young white boy who grew up on the campus of Nickel Academy, but he was never a ward of the state. His parents worked there, and so he just kind of grew up around this boys. He doesn't really know much of life outside of Nickel, even though he can go freely. He has a girlfriend in town, and Harper is a teenager as well, maybe a little bit older than Elwood and Turner, but he basically is like cool with Elwood and Turner. I put that in quotation marks because he takes them off of Nickel's campus to essentially do work for white people that live in Eleanor, which is the neighboring town. And because of that, Elwood and Turner get to feel a sense of freedom. Harper will drop them off to this white woman's house to do work, and he would go see his girlfriend that lived down the street. And so Elwood and Turner could kind of let their hair down around Harper just a little bit, because at the end of the day, he's still a white boy. But what was so interesting to me in the first scene, when Elwood goes off campus, he gets into the car with Harper and Turner, and they're driving into Eleanor. And Harper noticed the shift in Elwood's posture. He likes being out, the supervisor said, and he and Turner laughed. And this whole scene bore such an eerie resemblance to when enslaved people or enslaved folks were allowed to leave the plantation. And I just couldn't help but draw the parallels between incarceration and slavery, because these boys are essentially in a juvenile detention center, and they are being made to work for white people in the town that have essentially no association with Nickel Academy. And I'm like, how many times have I read a slave narrative or seen a slave movie where the enslaved person is like in the carriage or in the horse or just traveling with their enslaver, and the thought crosses their mind like, I can make a run for it right now. And when I think about this scene when Elwood is in the car, I'm like, that's probably exactly what he's thinking. In that same vein, as they're driving through the town of Eleanor, Colson Whitehead is writing all this imagery to describe this typical southern town, and I just felt on edge the entire time I was reading it. So he describes an American flag side on a pole attached to the roof. And then, as Elwood and Turner are painting this woman's gazebo in her backyard, the brand of paint was Dixie and the color was Dixie white. I literally wrote, all of this Americana imagery feels ominous. The whole time I kept thinking something bad is about to happen. Because for me, even though this is supposed to represent the typical American South, me seeing an American flag outside, white picket fences, a paint called Dixie White, I'm like, this is not a safe space for two black boys. Like, please get out of there as soon as possible. And I'm like, Colson Whitehead knew exactly what he was doing when he was writing these lines. And for me, I'm like, that shows such mastery of the craft, because like I'm on edge because I'm an adult person in 2025 reading this book, but they're two teenage boys who are just getting a little taste of freedom. And for me, I'm like, please don't like be careful. You know what I mean? Watch your back. And going back to Harper's character, once he picks up Elwood and Turner to bring them back to Nickel, I just think about the fact that as a young white man, Harper's able to just turn it off and turn it on. There's a lot of mention of good old boys in the novel and how essentially these disgusting white men have a club where they all know the violent, gruesome, disgusting things that they do amongst each other, but to the society they're held in high esteem. They're held as the men who carry the town and the society. And even though Harper acts cool with Elwood and Turner, at the end of the day, he's still a part of the good old boys club himself. There's a quote that says, Harper sat behind the VIP row with the rest of the staff. So now they're back at Nickel, and Elwood and Turner are with the rest of the Nickel boys, and Harper is with these white men who are running the facility. He carried himself differently in the company of his fellow supervisors, dropping his shirker's effect. Many an afternoon, Turner had seen the man's face and posture click into its proper place when a houseman or supervisor showed up. A snap to, dropping a disguise, or taking one up. And it's like, you cannot trust white men. I don't care how much they say that they're your friend. You can't trust them. And even just the fact that Turner's the one who took note of this observation shows his level of intuition, and the fact that even though he acts like he's cool with Harper, he's keen to who Harper really is. And I don't know that that's an observation that Elwood would have been able to make because he's so naive. I do feel like there's so much more I could get into thinking about Elwood and Turner's experiences with one another, but I really do think that this book was an ode to friendship, because if you've read the novel, and this is a huge, huge spoiler coming, so I'm telling you right now, if you didn't read this book, cut the video off right now. But because at the end of the novel, we know that Elwood is killed by Harper, because you cannot trust Harper. And Turner takes on Elwood's identity and goes on to live the rest of his life. After he escapes Nickel Academy, he moves to New York City. He's trying to, or he does build a life for himself, but assuming his friend's identity. To me, I read that as an ode to friendship, where it's like, my friend didn't make it, but I'm going to live on and carry this life, and I'm going to carry his name. It also is a way to protect himself, right? Because if Elwood were to get out of Nickel Academy, which he probably was, that was his first offense. He kind of just got caught up in something that had nothing to do with him. But Turner was probably going to get out of Nickel and go to prison, because that's just the type of life that he was living. So he was able to escape. He started all over. And to me, I found that to be very, very beautiful. I did go to book club with some women here in Jersey, and some other people had very different takes. They like essentially interpreted it as Turner trying to set Elwood up, and I was so flabbergasted by that interpretation of the book. And I'm wondering, if I tried to reread the book through that lens, if I would see something different. But for me, I felt like it was like, I really loved my friend, even in the short time we had together, because I'm assuming their time at Nickel was maybe like a year, maybe less. We don't actually have a proper timeline, or we probably do if I go and like look at the dates. But I just felt like Turner really loved Elwood and found an unexpected friend in him, and he decided to carry on his name. There are so many more things that I feel like could be talked about in this book. Today, I mostly focused on characterization, but I honestly, if y'all want to hear more, I could definitely talk more about this book. Just let me know. Anyway, if you stayed this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye.